Hello again. I'm here to talk about, today I'm going to talk about norms, which was something that came up in the first video, and then I mentioned it a little bit in the second video, but never actually talked about it. And I just want to reiterate that with these videos, I don't actually plan what I'm talking about. It's just off the cuff because it's like talking to myself, although now I am with having very much in mind with this video that I'm making it for an audience. Anyway, so norms are interesting things, and we have different types of norms in society, and depending on what society you're in the world, norms are going to vary. But within all societies, there's what's called absolute norms. So absolute norms are norms that are without question. So for instance, an absolute norm is like, it's not good to murder people. That's an absolute norm. Whereas norms around appropriate clothing, which includes things like tattoos and piercings and hair dye and all those kinds of things, like personal appearance, those norms vary fantastically around the world. In some parts of the world, women are not even to show their face. In other parts of the world, it's women are not considered women if they're not twerking half naked in a video on Facebook. So what's considered right or wrong or just or fair varies depending on where you are in the world. So with norms, obviously a big problem that we have in societies when you have very multicultural societies like we do in Australia, and you have a lot of competing norms. So you have people coming in from lots of different countries, even if they're first or second generation people, third generation people, they're still taught those norms of their homeland. And so you have a lot of people competing over norms, and that's something that's in the media at the moment with big issues in regards to things like the burqa, So it's a competing norm in Australian society whether women should be or should not be allowed to wear the burqa in Australia. Anyway, so I'm not going to enter debates about what is right or wrong there. All I just want to say is that just because something is a norm in mainstream society, whether it's an absolute norm or whether it's a legal norm because it's been enacted as a law, making it a norm, if it's a statistical norm, as in most people tend to do this, most people experience this, no matter what that norm is, how it comes to be a norm, it's we shouldn't take it for granted that means that that's okay. Because when you look at society, we have a lot of norms in society, and I'm just going to throw a few norms around there just for people to think about. Okay, so one norm is not to murder. Yes, we all going to nod our heads and agree to that. Another norm is not to rape, but that's not even a norm that's appreciated by every member of every society, and that's not a norm that's appreciated in every society. Okay, there are definitely societies in this world where it is considered a norm that a woman is there for a man's taking. Anyway, there's norms around smoking. When I was born in the 70s, it was smoking was very acceptable. Smoke in the car, smoke in restaurants, smoke in cafes, smoke in the workplace, smoke everywhere. When I had my first job, my first job was cleaning, but my second job, working in an office, selling raffle tickets for the Spastic Centre of New South Wales, I was a young teenager, and my friends and I worked there, and we all smoked, and we used to have little ashtrays there, and we'd smoke, puff away. We're underage and smoking anyway. So, but we did, and that was that. And that was not so out of the norm back then for 14-year-olds to be smoking cigarettes in the 80s. So, whereas the norms around smoking have changed. Originally, when smoking was introduced in Australia, it was a very deviant thing. People who smoked were deviant, and it was associated with particular cultures, with historically with slum areas, in inner city areas, in particular with ethnic groups, and it also was associated with like unemployment and other substance abuse such as alcohol or other drugs. So like all the opium smokers smoke cigarettes, and all the alcoholics smoke cigarettes, and they'd all gather together. So it was really frowned upon, and especially for women to smoke, back in the 19th century. Anyway, moving along, becomes really popular. It's so popular and so the norm to do that there's even positive advertising. I remember seeing the Smurfs, man, and there was positive advertising about smoking, you know, and the smoking was associated with all these amazing things, like with fitness, you know, like wow, you could climb mountains and you could jet ski and you could be a hero like the Marlboro Man and all these different things. It was amazing, and these people had amazing lives, and it was just awesome, and you can have that if you smoke, you know. And now the norm is that no, it's, you know, if you're a smoker and you're at a restaurant with you know, maybe a large group of people, and you're a smoker, you tend to be abnormal. It's frowned upon, and even just wanting to leave the table to go outside and smoke, and then you can't smoke within a certain amount of meters of the building, the front of the building, and blah 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 blah. So, and to that, I'm going to have a cigarette. Now, the norm would have been, in the 50s, if I was doing this would be so bloody cool, right? If I was doing it in the 70s, it would just be, yeah, that's just what you do. But now, it's amazing. I mean, who can watch it? Who can honestly watch that and say absolutely 100% it doesn't make them feel uncomfortable? Because there would be some people who watch this that will make them feel uncomfortable that I'm smoking. How can she do that? It's really bad for your health, blah 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 blah. So I'm going against mainstream norms. You know, the convention in society, the consensus in our society is you know, to not smoke. You know, there's all sorts of other things as well. Anyway, but I happen to agree with the principles behind that one. I think, yes, smoking is not good for you, but I do admit I am an addict. So, anyway, that's one norm. But there's all sorts of intrinsic norms in society that some of them aren't really beneficial to the individual. Not giving up smoking is beneficial to anybody. Like anyone who's a smoker who says, oh yeah, it's fine, it's, you know, it does nothing wrong, they're really deluding themselves, right? But then there are other norms in society which will say similar things about other things, like for instance illicit drugs. They'll say, oh, all illicit drugs are really bad and this is what's going to happen and blah 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 blah. And no doubt there are cases where these things do happen. And of course, any drugs you take are going to have a biochemical effect on your brain and physiological effect on your body. And but the funny thing is there's all of these other drugs which are legal, which are okay, and the norms in society, oh, well, that's okay. And if you actually look at statistics worldwide, most people are addicted to the legal drugs. That's where the biggest addiction lies and the biggest problems. And a lot of overdoses are taken by legal drugs, right? I hope I didn't say illegal before, I meant to say legal drugs. Anyway, so, you know, one of the biggest problem drug, the biggest problem drug in the world is alcohol, right? Alcohol is incredibly destructive, and that is so socially acceptable, and it doesn't even have the packaging of smoking. You know, it has, and it's still, they can still advertise and they can still do seductive ads and all sorts of things in order to win people over, and do packaging which is tailored to teen markets, even though they're not even allowed to legally drink. So, you know, but that's all a norm, and everybody accepts that and goes, oh yeah, that's fine, you know, and supports it. And how people support norms is with either action, supporting the norm, or inaction by not fighting the norm. So, you know, marijuana, for example, being illegal is another norm, and a lot of people go, no, if you make it legal, then more people are going to smoke it and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, I'm not going to not smoke marijuana because it's legal, and I'm not going to start smoking marijuana because it's legal. If it becomes legal, I'll do whatever I'm going to do, however I'm going to do it anyway. But, you know, it's interesting that some norms, they are positioned in society to makes a whole bunch of people deviant. Because when you break a norm and you're not going with the mainstream, that means that's the definition of deviance, is being in a minority. So if you are an illicit drug taker, you are a deviant because you are in a minority of people. But you could be a barbiturate user and an alcoholic, and you would be within certain norms of mainstream society. Although technically, if you're an alcoholic or a barbiturate abuser, that makes you a deviant too, because that's still drug abuse. Anyway, but as we all know, there's a massive divide between drug use and drug abuse. And there's a big divide between drug use and drug addiction. So there's some big things there. But I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm just going to focus on norms. So, yeah, there's a lot of norms in society. And it's interesting that we politicians and the media will pull out these norms for their benefit to get people, motivated and even signing petitions to give away their freedoms and rights and civil liberties, such as a lot of the the threats from terrorism. And I'm not doubting that those threats are real and that there is an actual issue there. But it's interesting that the government is seeking to look at people, to study people, and to basically spy on people, and to take away your right of privacy as a way of combating it. When actually it's a motive. They're using that. That's an agenda. That's what they want to do, because that gives them control, right? And it's becoming a norm. And so what this used to be decades ago, conspiracy stuff. It'd be like, oh, government's watching the people. Oh, that person and people think those kinds of things. That's conspiracy. Now it's like mainstream, acknowledged. Yeah, and not only that, people accept it and people support things that are going to make life harder for all of us, But it's really tricky because you go, okay, well, there might be something here that might be worthwhile for the government to do to help combat this or that, but yet it just all depends on how they word things, really, when they're going to enact laws. That's the main thing, But the problem we've got is we've got a two-party system, and we've got some independents there to protect sort of democracy, so hopefully they'll speak up and not let certain bills go through which change the norms again for us, so that we are all our privacies are completely invaded. But, people like to think, Western culture is like we're supreme. A lot of people in Western culture, and this is the fundamental problem of the world, is that people, no matter what culture they're in, tend to favour their own culture and think that the position of their own culture, politically, socially, religiously, spiritually, is all supreme to other cultures. Hence the current situation we've got with Islamic extremists, terrorists, and the problem we've got with countries like America being so aggressive with trying to get into other countries any way they can to take control and spread their way, the economic way of living. And that's another norm in society. It's a norm in society that we all work and we all pay taxes, and that there's nothing about having to do something that you like or you don't like. If you actually are a person that says, well, look, I'm not going to do that job because it's got no passion for me, it's going to kill my soul and I'm going to be so depressed, people go, you've got a fucking attitude problem. You're the kind of people this country don't need. Get the hell out. And it's a shame, because that's a norm. It's a norm in society that most people in Australia will work jobs that they don't particularly enjoy, will sacrifice a part of themselves, to do that job, and all to be productive and earn money for massive corporations owned by a small amount of people, to make them richer and wealthier and own more of the world and control more of the world, while their own personal life goes down the gurgler, and they're people are buying homes and they're trying to be in the nice places, and then they've got to travel hours to work, and then the tolls go up, and then daycare goes up, and everything becomes so expensive. Then bread and milk go up, then petrol goes up, then doctors' bills, healthcare systems change, everything goes up. They've got to work more hours, and then they see less, and the whole lifestyle people want, they don't get. But it's become a norm that's what has to happen. And if you speak out against these kinds of things, like I'm a person that just thinks the whole basis of the international community being one based on economics is insane. That is so insane. The whole basis of the world should be based on love and community and helping others. You know, there are many people who are weak in society. There's plenty of people who aren't. Why can't we naturally have a society where those that are strong can help the weak, and the weak can help in other ways that they are capable of, you know? Why do we have to have so much regulation, and why is everything about money? You know, but it's a norm and everybody's chasing it. Everybody's chasing the dollar. Everybody wants. It's a norm to be really superficial and to want lots and lots of things and to have the latest of things. And Australians are mad for it. We are per capita the biggest consumer of iPads, mobile phones, all new technologies. We embrace them the most out of any other country in the world. We are so hungry for it. All things. You know, things, you know, and you need money to get these things, you know. But that's a norm and that's acceptable. You know, does that mean it's right? Does that mean that's the best way we can live? Does that mean that's the most prosperous society? Just because that's what mainstream society supports and what most people believe in and what most people do actions and do inactions to support? God, no. Not by a long shot. No way. Not according to me anyway. I've got to say no way, you know. But there are lots of other norms, you know, like for instance in the justice system, it's a norm that, you know, if a person is raped, whether that's a male or a female or a minor, that when they go to court, they're going to be quizzed about their sexual history, like as if that has any bearing on it, you know, so that somehow it can be made that they're responsible for that act happening. And that's a norm and that's accepted in our society. And so I just want to say for a second here, you know, we look at other societies and the big one at the moment is Islam. So we look at Islam and go, oh, they suppress their women, blah, 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 you know, hiding them under those burqas and rah, 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 rah. And it's like, okay, just a couple of things about Australia. One, on an international scale, per capita, Amnesty figures, we're one of the most domestically abusive countries in the world. So that's spousal abuse, okay, one of the most horrendous. Last year, I think about 3,000 women were murdered in domestic situations in Australia. So that's one thing. Another thing is we have that justice system where women are put on the stand and they're interrogated about their lifestyle choices, how many boyfriends they've had, what they were wearing at the time of when they met their perpetrator. You know, if the perpetrator's someone that they know, well, surely they must have been, you know, flirting with them or asking for it in some way, and that's considered okay. When women are murdered by their partners, there's something like, I can't remember the exact figures, it's in my book, I studied it last year, but about 50% of men get away with a lighter sentence or acquittal by saying that the woman provoked him. But when women try to do the same thing, it's something like 3% of women get away with it when they've murdered their male partner. So that's just an interesting thing, and that's norms in our society, you know, and it's what a lot of people believe, and you know, and it's a norm in society that, you know, if you're a liberated woman, you know, you show your tits off in public, you show your ass crack off with your G-string coming up your back, you know, that you know, and that's self-expression, yeah, man. And it's like, can't you see you've just been sold and bought by marketing, you know, they want you to be and do all those things, so you'll buy products. You know, they want, and it's actually exploitation. You know, women have been so heavily exploited in who and what they should be in this world, in the Western world, that it's actually a form of suppression. People think, it's liberation, it's expression, we can do what we want. And it's like, no, a lot of people aren't really doing what they want. They're going along with things because that's the thing to be at the time. Like, just look, for instance, about how the body images lately, like, I mean, it's been insane. It went to a critical stage, you know, probably about 5-10 years ago for a while with the anorexic models, and then there was a backlash about that. So now things are starting to change slowly. But yeah, you know, for women have to have the gap between their thighs and you know, because apparently that makes us taste nicer for men, and it's like, oh, excellent, you know, how great is that? That's a goal to reach for. That's a norm. It's a norm about women's body images, you know, and we all go, oh, and people go along with it and keep supporting it, and people try and say, oh, no, we don't, I don't do that, and I don't do that, and I don't do that, I don't do that. But it's amazing, you know, and I've seen a lot of that since I've put on 20 kilos, and it's amazing how people, when you say, oh, I'm feeling really good, I think I look good today, and some people look at you and just go, what? Are you serious? And you're like, oh, fucking fabulous, thanks. You know, so I have had people do that. Yeah, so it's just like, you know, but that's a norm in society, and it's, you know, another interesting thing that I noticed is, and it doesn't make it right just because it's a norm. Another interesting thing is that in our society, it's not a norm for people to have their faces tattooed, right? Especially like lots, maybe like, you know, the guys been in prison have teardrops and stuff and little symbols to mean different things. But generally, the face is a no-go zone, and people who have lots of tattoos all over their face, people are like, oh, they're deviant, they're bad, you know, that's just such a bad look, rah, 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 rah. But yet, at the same time, a lot of people will go on, you know, websites on the internet which show, you know, the Burmese women who tattoo their faces, and it's a sign of beauty, and go, wow, isn't it amazing, you know? And they have and then there's also the Agori tribe in India, who, you know, they paint their face, and they wear the big, you know, earrings to widen out their ears and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, oh, it's so fantastic, rah, 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 rah. But if someone does it in a white society, it's like, oh, that's so bad, rah, rah, rah. It's like, well, why? And then people even get wound up in knots and say, well, they shouldn't be doing that because that's what those cultures do, and that has meaning, and then they're just copying it. It's like, well, what's actually wrong with that? What's actually wrong with looking at something that another culture does and going, you know, I really like that, you know, like, I burn incense. Do I come from an Asian? Well, my dad was born in Asia, so my dad is Asian. So, but I mean, incense is originally an Asian tradition, and it's bound up with a whole lot of other things. And it's like, well, what's wrong if I want to burn incense, but I'm not? I'm a blue-eyed, blonde-haired Australian girl. Does that matter? Does it matter? I mean, who makes up these rules? Who says that this is right and that is wrong, and these are the norms and this is what we should all do? But what I ask you to do is just to think about some of the norms you believe in, and there might be a lot of things that you don't consciously believe in. You might not even believe in them, but all of your behaviour and all of your choices suggest that you're really saying to the world, this is what I think and this is what I believe in, you know. And just because that's what the majority think, or that's what the media thinks, and or even for some people that's what your friends think, or that's what your family thinks, you know, it doesn't mean that by a long shot that that's the way it ought to be. You know, so just challenge things, challenge society, challenge the norms. You know, there are plenty of norms in our society that are, quite frankly, in my opinion, quite insane, like some of the things I've mentioned now. And, yeah, don't be sort of boxed in by regular daily thought, or by a lack of thought, and actually stimulating your mind to think about things and think about how things could be different. Because for as many people who are ignorant about the choices that they can make, and the people who say, well, no, I'm not going to, you know, they might not be so ignorant and they don't make any choices. And then there's the people who, you know, support the norms and believe in the norms. Well, nothing will ever change. We'll always have Liberal and Labor. You know, we'll always be picking between, you know, bad and worse, and, you know, we're going to have more and more laws, and we're already a heavily policed state, where norms that should be just things that are passed down in customs throughout generations, that are changeable with each generation, well, that's ceasing to happen. Now things are being legalised, and we're being told, you know, and if we don't follow those norms and those procedures, it has consequences for us, you know. So just think about what it is that you maybe can do or maybe stop doing in order just to make the world a better place. It can be more pleasurable for all of us if we just think about it. Okay, cheers.